the month of Av is such a great time for us to ask this question, right? What will become of our nation? And everywhere you go, and sometimes you think things are getting worse. And the reason why things seem to get worse is because God has to expose the nation for what it is really. So the heart is being exposed. And so one of the things I remember, when we talk about the company of the West, it is really there has to be people who are going to plug the breaches in this part of the land. So I'm glad, the cities, friends, you are all here, and we're all part of the same struggle, right? So I want to continue this series, and we are really now at part 3, right? And we want to talk about, can a nation be a sheep nation? And you'll be surprised when you talk to Christians, and they don't even understand the whole concept of sheep and goat nation. But you look at the Word of God, can you find sheep and goat nation in the Word of God? Yes, only 2 of you, yes. And so it is in the Bible, but for the longest time, the body of Christ do not want to confront this issue. They do not want to think, because it's like they kept on focusing on the salvation of individual souls, which is very important, by the way, but that's not all that God wants us to do. In the end, nations can become a redeemed kind of prospect in heaven. So why are we doing this series? Because here's the reality. There is a path. Every nation, there is a possibility to become sheep nation. But the fact that Jesus talked about sheep and goat meant some nation will not become sheep. So this is just the reality, okay? Each nation, however, needs to be evaluated. Everyone say evaluated. So it's like every time you join a competition, you go to you join, many of you are going to higher education, go to university, you sit for exam, you have to know what is the standard expected of you. So when I was a uni student, now some of you know I don't really study so much, okay? But then I made sure I understand the standard. So I made sure I understand what is required of me. And so many times exam, and people just cannot understand how you can even do that. 3 hours paper, I usually walk out after 1.5 hours. And people will be like, you are nuts. No, I say, I've done enough. And my target is high credit, okay? So I always get high credit. High credit is not great, but it's not bad, okay? So that's the thing. You have to know what is the standard of God. What is the standard? And what is God's standard? God has determined to use Israel as a covenant nation and to determine the qualification. So this is something that immediately I know a lot of people will be like, oh, this is not very good for us. Indeed, it is not very good for us. But it is not the only standard, because we are the ecclesia, right? Who are the ecclesia? All of us here, right? So we are the ecclesia of this land, of this nation. We have to assume the role of gap standards. That means when there is a gap, we go and fill the gap. We go and tackle the issues at the gap. And the one who shall go into the breach. So then we have to ask this question again, especially in the month of Av and leading up to the month of Elul. What is our role as the ecclesia? What must we do? What shall we prophesy again to the destiny of this nation? Now, we have our monthly Nation Watch prophetic processing training only once a month. And I really encourage those of you, if you consider yourself a regular part of this tribe, you want to make sure you are there. Because that will really open up. And who knows, you may have a very critical role there. So part of this teaching is inspired by what happened during all those Nation Watch teaching. So at the end of the day, we're still asking this question: what will become of Malaysia or whatever nation that you represent? So we have done this, is part 3 already, so we did the introduction. Then we talk about the breaches. So last week, the breaches is more like an overview or the possible opening. But today and the next portion, we want to look at certain war issues. If we want to become a sheep nation, what are the issues that we have to tackle? So 2 portions on that. And then I want to especially look at America, because 250th anniversary this year. And it is a very interesting covenant nation. Not perfect. They have many, many weaknesses. And in fact, when you look at our history, almost immediately after the founding of the nation, the enemy has created many, many holes and breaches. It's the same for Malaysia, right? See, 1963, when we were formed, immediately, everyone say immediately. Immediately want a covenant partner, like within 12 months, Singapore left. And things like that. So we have a lot of breaches that has not been dealt with yet. Then, of course, the last part will be the most interesting one. We want to actually prophesy into the nation. Because no use, we kept talking and talk about the possibility and things like that. What is God really saying about this? All right, so war issues. Today I'm going to talk about 4. We'll look at kingdom process. Very quickly, we want to look at the concept of ship nation. I know this may not be new for some of you, but if you're new with us, you have to understand the biblical support, the biblical exaltation of ship nation. Then we want to talk about redigging spiritual well of past season, and this is a balance is needed because so many people are looking at the good old days. Have you heard people say the old days are better? Like Mahathir's time is better. Okay, nobody really say that. But now you look at what's happening at the election level. People are saying Barisan Nasional is better. So we look at past season, some of the potential, but we cannot stay there. We don't stay in the past. Then we want to talk about generation alignment. What do we mean by that? What are the things we need to align now? Don't talk about our parents. Don't talk about our grandparents. It is irrelevant. What's important is what are we supposed to do now? Then the second portion, I want to talk about communication and soundproofing. And in fact, that's the thing I've been thinking for a long time. It's that when we have very critical prophetic words, do we really want to release it in a public setting? Increasingly, I'm like inclined not to. In fact, very often when Judah, when you're all doing things, I'm hearing a lot of things, but I just don't want to release it yet. So it is a balance. It's a balance, okay? Because sometimes when you speak into the atmosphere, something shifts, but you don't want to preempt the enemy. So where do we? So this is the thing I want to talk about. How do we do a balance or soundproofing? Then we want to talk about Cyrus. Of course, Cyrus gives access and then gives supplies. Sometimes we look around and we're like, what's in our hands? Nothing. It's like no resources. But then the thing is, God will give us the resource. And finally, we want to talk about Nehemiah, of course, the hybrid. So that will be the next part. All right, so let's talk about kingdom process. And you know this chart very, very well. Ever since we move into the new move of God, we talk about the kingdom process, right? There are 4 overview. And so at the beginning is the shifting and activation, and that's what things like a time to succeed, that's what prophetic activation, all these kind of things, church history, you're causing people to consider truth and hopefully get them into the movement of heaven. You see, it's not simply, you're part of a church, you're a Christian. No, we have to do what God is doing. If you are not doing what God is doing, then you are not part of the movement. It is very scary because then all of a sudden you think about what Jesus said, you prophesy in my name, you heal the sick in my name, but I do not know you. Yeah. That's very scary. And there are many interpretations. People say, maybe these are not believers, but personally I believe God is talking about believer. And it's very serious because actually in that passage, he literally said they can go to hell. Of course, then once you have the shifting activation, and this is where we get the new people, and people come, people go, but some will decide they want to have the alignment. Excuse me. They want to move together. They want to kind of be like, this is our place together. And of course, alignment has many other things also, like alignment with Israel, alignment to become one new man. Actually, if you read carefully Ephesians 2, Paul says so clearly that the two are to become one new man. So that's why we have this spirit of replacement theology that is very, very strong. That says that Israel is not relevant anymore. And especially these days with all the things happening in Middle East, people are becoming very triggered by that. Once you have these two, you go into Reformation. And later we'll look at what's the difference, okay? And you see, what's the difference between revival and Reformation? Now, revival is very important. You need that initial spark. So it's like, even when we talk about courtship, right? You see, every time we say courtship, you need the initial spark. So it's like, I want to retain the streak of mentioning the point every teaching. But it's true. If there's no initial interest, there's no point. Look at neighbor and say, there's no point. If there's no initial interest, agree? Agree? But then the initial interest is not going to sustain you. It's going to sustain you for a while. Then the Reformation is a sustained one. So, I know it's a very weird term, but we always say this, I say this often, that if you want to get into a relationship, you have to be prepared to die to yourself. You have to give up your right. So that's the thing about Reformation. Then, only then. Everyone say, only then. You can war for sheep nations. So many people want to go to the last step immediately, right? They'll be like, we can fight for the nations. And when people hear about, remember when Chuck Pierce came and talked about the 10 nations, and people are like, we should link with all those nations. Come on, you have not even done the basic stuff. And by the way, when Chuck came to Penang last year, I think a lot of people kind of missed the point. The 10 nations is later on. What is happening right now is an evaluation of Malaysia. We have not passed that evaluation. In fact, I would say we are in the red zone right now. Need remedial class. You know, any of you ever been asked to join a remedial? Not yet. Okay, not yet. Good one. So that means you don't do so well, and in future you're going to really fall off the cliff unless you change. So I just feel like we are at remedial now. Talking about Malaysia, that if we don't shift, we can really fall off the cliff, okay? No, it's not a bad thing. It's a reality. See, when we talk about nation, when we do Nation Watch, we have to speak reality. We cannot be like, not like that lah. Some people are not in reality, but we need to stay in reality. So the kingdom process, when you look at the thing, is both concurrent and progressive. What do you mean by that? That means all the four things can happen at the same time, at different phase, but at the same time, it's also linear. The shifting, alignment, reformation, and sheep nation, there is a linear process to that. But it doesn't mean it's a straight linear kind of thing. Because certain parts of sheep nation can already begin. But generally, it is concurrent, okay? And so we are doing portions of all four at the same time, and yet foundation must be set. Everyone say foundation. That's why the step one, everyone say step one. The shifting and alignment is all about foundation. And this is what Jesus said about foundation in Matthew 7, 24 to 25. Therefore, everyone who hears these words of mine and acts on them. See, a lot of time, I think somehow people just cannot read that line. You hear, but you have to obey. So if you don't do what you have heard from God, that means you are not having the right foundation. Maybe compared to a wise man who built his house on the rock, and the rain fell and the floods came and the winds blew, so all the shaking, yet it did not fall, for it had been founded. That means it has a strong foundation on the rock. And of course, when later on Jesus prophesied in Matthew 16, on this rock, you are Peter, you are the small rock, but on this rock, the revelation of who Jesus is. So that's why he already preempted the understanding of the rock in Matthew 7. See, when we talk about foundation, it's a fundamental, and sometimes it's boring. Those of you, if you're into sports, if you ever join any competition, and every time the coach will be like, warm up, very important, warm up. Then why I need to warm up? I want to hit the ball now. If you don't warm up, you know what will happen? You get injured. You get, something will get twisted. So when you focus on the fundamental, it helps with what? Muscle memory. You don't have to think so much already. Train instinct. Do you know that your instinct can be trained? And some of you are in certain profession. So it's like, it's not, some people want to be like just, okay, I want to be free flow all the time. But there's no such thing as free flow all the time. Even creative industry, like music, things like you cannot free flow all the time. You're not going to get paid, okay, if you're free flow all the time. The client will be like, out of topic, I'm not going to pay you. Then spiritual intuition. That's why it sounds like a big contradiction. How can something be spiritual from God and yet it relies on my soulish intuition? When you look at how the Word of God is written, you look at the Bible, there is a lot of human element in it, right? I mean, there's no need to be over spiritual. Oh no, it's all from God. No. It's like the circumstance. I mean, just read a few of the Old Testament prophets. They are so beyond emo. Okay? And so there is that human intuition, but at the same time, it's spiritual. God allows the word to be expressed like that. So that's why this kind of thing can be trained. But you have to activate. You have to find ways to do that. Reformation, we already say, differentiate from revival. That's why I said initial spark. And this is the word spark is what caused me to think about courtship just now. Okay. Anyway. So now another way to think about reformation is sustained revival. That means you have revival, but you can continue to have revival. Then you have a reformation. And you look at Matthew 28, Jesus say, how do you reform nation? How do you disciple nation? Through teaching. Everyone say teaching. That's why we need to have teaching. And people are, oh, boring, don't want to have teaching. But this is the thing that will cause nations to be shifted. So when you have sufficient shifting, the fundamental, the alignment, the reformation, eventually you create what we call a moment of tipping point. So what's the tipping point? It's basically a window. So a window in terms of time is not forever. That means there is a window and where a nation and region has a potential to shift into ship expression. So you have that moment that we have to take advantage. Otherwise, we have to wait for another cycle. And you look at the month of Av, when the 12 spies came back, they have that window, that moment. They could have possessed their promised land that time. But they let that window lapse and God has to wait another 40 years. All right, so let's talk quickly about the concept of ship nation. This may not be new for some of you, but it's a good revision, okay? So we start with this question. Can a nation truly be shifted and saved? You have to answer that yourself. I'm not going to answer for you, okay? Is the concept of saving a nation even biblical? See, just as a person can accept salvation, right? And kingdom, you can accept that. A nation can also do the same. Then we look back at the biblical concept of nation, both the New Testament and Old Testament. You see, that's why in New Testament, the Greek word is not a full reflection because the Greek word kind of talk about the ethnic group, the people group. But nation actually includes more than people. It includes your culture. It includes your inheritance. It includes all the redemptive potentials. And see, this is what happened in Psalms 2:8. And God the Father and Jesus is having that discussion, and Jesus is like, okay, I will come down to earth. But then, this is what I want. Ask of me, and I will surely give you the nations as your inheritance. So God the Father promised that Jesus can have the nations. So this is a deal right at the beginning. And the very ends of the earth as your possession. So this is the price and reward for his commitment to the cross. Joel 3:14, multitudes in a valley of decision, and people usually think of the people, but the multitudes could be nations as well. For the day of the Lord is near in the valley of decision. Then of course this one is very clear. Matthew 25:32. All the nations, how many nations? All the nations will be gathered before him, and he will separate them from one another as a shepherd separates the sheep from the goats. So unfortunately, some nations will become goat. Some nations cannot be saved. And later we'll look at what are the things that can be done, okay? Matthew 24:14, now these are just very quick overview for you. The gospel of the kingdom shall be preached in the whole world. To where? The whole world, right? As a testimony to all the nations. How many nations again? All the nations. Then the end will come. So this is another motivation. If you want Jesus to come back quickly, then you want to cause the gospel of the kingdom to be preached to all nations. Whether they accept it or not is another matter. But once it's done, this is one of the conditions. Then, of course, the other condition is restoration of all things. Now, another overview verse, Romans 8:19. For the anxious longing of the creation. Now you see the emotion of creation. Why is creation waiting for the revealing of the sons of God? Because, remember, earth and the land and creation were cursed. Were cursed when Adam and Eve fell, right? So it caused work to be cursed and things like that. So Apostle Paul is saying that, look, at some point, God is going to restore the sons of God. And they will do an overturning. Anyway, to sum all this up, excuse me. So this can be a separate teaching all by itself, but I just want to quickly sum up. When Jesus came, what did he accomplish? First, of course, we and God, we have a problem, right? Relationship between God and man, restore. So that's the first thing. We now have access to God. Then the second thing is we are saved not to go to heaven immediately. We are saved so that we become sons of God on earth. And then, while on earth, we are able to restore the dominion mandate. Genesis 1:28. And this is a mandate, be fruitful and multiply. Remember that mandate, etc., etc. This is a mandate needed for nations to be discipled. That's why you're still on earth here. If you're not dead yet, you're still on earth here, it's because you have a task to restore dominion mandate wherever you are. Okay, so that's a very, very quick thing. So what causes a nation to be shaped? A few factors. And this is where I want you to read carefully, because you want to ask God, what is your role? Okay, look at your neighbor and say, what is your role? So everyone has to find a role. Because the first thing about how a nation can become shaped is a collective. So that means it is an overall decision. Collective manner, a nation accepts or rejects the gospel. So if collective reject the gospel, that means the nation cannot become shaped. Then, of course, fortunately, it does not just depend on the people. There is the ecclesia. That's us, right? So the effort of the ecclesia. Notice the word I use, effort. You have to put in work. You cannot just sit there, go on kaki and say, okay, become sheep. Doesn't work like that. You have to put in effort. Now, your effort, don't be a busybody, is within the boundary God has set for you. If God doesn't ask you to pray for other nations, that's none of your business. So be very clear of your national boundary. Yes, undoubtedly, some of you will be given multiple nations. It's okay. Some of you are given continent. Some of you, have a worldwide ministry. That's fine. No issue at all. Then within the ecclesia, we have another category, watchmen. The effort of watchmen. And because watchmen is different, they have a specialized kind of gifting. They can enter in and they can repair national breaches. So some of the great watchmen, of course, Ezekiel is a watchman, Nehemiah is a watchman, and these are the kind of example. Then the next thing is, if we are ecclesia, if we are watchmen, we cannot be on the sideline. What do we have to do? We have to enter into a real season of contending. You see, you cannot win unless you are a participant. So you say you want to win this tournament, where's your name? You didn't even register to compete. Or you register, you got disqualified, cannot wake up. Some of you have to sign up, right? 9 a.m. have to sign up. 9:15, the alarm just went off. Too bad, you were disqualified. Wait for next year. Actually, sometimes have you heard, even like world-class competition, the participant miss out because they could not wake up. Have you heard this kind of story? Once in a while. Actually, of course, it's the reason. I remember one time, I think is it Wimbledon, one of the tennis players got stuck in the traffic jam. Then after a while, they said, okay, then get out of the car and walk to Wimbledon. Then the last thing we have to understand, we have full authority. Everyone say, we have full authority. So that's one, because Jesus said, all authority on earth and in heaven has been given to me, right? So you think about when he charged the people in Acts 1. When Jesus gave the charge, he is implying that whatever authority I have, I also give to you. And later you see the early church, you see the apostles, you see Apostle Paul, they all demonstrate that whatever authority, that's why Jesus said, you will do greater things. And of course, the authority, you have to do something. You have to manifest the authority. No use you say, I have authority, and no use people look at you, you have great authority. Then so what if you don't do anything? Okay, let's talk about redigging the spiritual well of past season. Now, this is a teaching that I did quite a few years ago, but I just kind of want to just help us to have an understanding. Now, this is related to what we're doing now, Nation Watch and things like that. So redigging, right? So spiritual well. Well is a thing with water. Okay, just make sure you understand, because some people maybe you've never seen a well in your whole life before. Okay, so it's like you think about who is the one who had to dig a new well. The most famous character in the Bible is Isaac. And you think about Isaac, right? That when Abraham passed away, he was so prosperous. He had like, the possession he has was so much. So you just imagine, you have an inheritance of billions. But even then, Isaac went into a cycle of difficult times because of drought and things like that. So the thing to remember is that, yes, you get inheritance, you get all the supply, but it doesn't mean you don't have to dig your own well. See, that's why inheritance, inheritance is good and bad. It causes you to have a good foundation. But if it causes you to not do anything for life, you're like, I have a lot of money already, I don't need to do anything, then it destroys your destiny, okay? So 4 things about redigging. The first thing is study. Everyone say study. I didn't sign up for study, okay? But that's the thing. You want to study history. You want to study what has happened. And that's why I always emphasize, a lot of people I know, every time come to history class, you're like, oh, so boring. I mean, our national syllabus history is crap, but the thing about study is you have to learn how to read history properly. The good news, what is the good news? The good news is prophetic people already have an advantage. You are able to sift some of the bullshit, okay? So you read the history properly, but then the thing about reading is you have to acknowledge truth and facts. You have to acknowledge, for example, we have a bridge ever since 1964. We have a bridge in 1969. We have a lot of bridges in this country. If you don't accept this fact, then you're not going to move on. So don't be in la la land. Don't be like, oh, no, our nation is good and things like that. Yeah, there's a good part, but there's a bad part. It's the same for yourself, for your family. There's a good part and there's a bad part. So after you study, what do? Then you ask for revelation. And this is the thing. So the spirit of prophecy is over the land. And you want to ask this question, what is the way forward for us? So the good news, here's the good news. There is always a way out. There is always a way out. So that's why the enemy wants to trap us. You see, what is hope defer? Hope defer at the end of the day is very simple. It is a feeling of no way out. And there is a very strong spirit in this land because of multiple broken promises over a period of many years. But this is what the prophetic people must ask. What is the way forward for us? And when the revelation comes, you press into that. So once you have revelation, what do? What's the next one? You have to, warfare. You have to step into the arena already. And you start to ask this question. You see, when you war, you don't just simply go and war, right? I mean, that's why some of you play games and things like that. I think it is a helpful exercise to play game because you think logically. Some people, I see them play game, it's like shocking. It's like there's no thought process one. Then it's like, what are you doing? So then you have to ask this question, what is preventing the fulfillment of God's purposes? So what is hindering the blessing from coming? So you're looking at the tactics of the enemy, you're looking at the structure of the enemy, you're looking at their strategies. By the way, the enemy has a lot of strategy, and they have done very, very, very well. I mean, when I say very, very well, they are very systematic. I mean, Lucifer is a very systematic person, okay? Then, of course, once you go into warfare, you have to win, right? You have to possess. You have to redeem time, things which has been lost. See, redeeming time, we're talking about dealing with the past issue that continues to haunt a nation. You have to redeem that. And then finally, of course, the month of Av is such a good time for us to remember this is a time we can redeem, we can possess the promises of God. So this is the whole process. Okay, now a few more things I want to talk about. So you think about redigging, it's a funnel. I always like to use the funnel system because it's like a few things have to come together. And then, so what are the things? You have all the events, you start to do the studying, and you have to accept. That means you know that these are the things that happen. We cannot change the past, but we can deal with the issue of the past. Then, of course, the revelation is what causes us to advance. So events, what happened in the past, we already say, a correct reading of history, no denial, you accept both the good and bad, and then this is where you bridge the natural and the spiritual. You get the word of knowledge, you get a prophetic understanding of what happened, and then you ask the question, how does this impact the future? And then you start to do it. Now, I want to say a few things about spiritual well, okay? So how do you picture spiritual well? It's like a reservoir. You know, reservoir is like your reserve. It's like a pool. It's like a well. So that it has been done by some people in the past. That means a previous generation did something. So for example, Isaac didn't necessarily dig a new well. He redid the well of his father. Right? So that's why Abraham already did something, but when he was there, when Isaac went there, it was dry again. But the instruction is you can dig it again, and there will be new water. It's the same thing, but you have to take some active action. So something has been established in the past season. Now, it can be accumulated because of godly worship. So that's why we are not saying everything of the past is bad, because there is that kind of godly worship that creates this kind of atmosphere. And when you look at prayer movement of the last season, it can have a deposit that can still be cashed out in this season. So that's the thing that we want to learn and to activate. It can even be through the hopes. So your spiritual wealth can come from the hope, the desire, and even the prophesying of the people. That means people have been saying, this is the true potential of the land. Maybe it has not come to pass in our season. For that reason, we have to record all the prophetic words of past season properly. Isaac and Jacob demonstrated this principle because both of them received the lineage. That means they received the full blessings of Abraham, right? Remember, Isaac received the full blessing. So Isaac, So Isaac, and then later on, Jacob with Esau also have some struggle. So eventually they receive the blessing, which is like spiritual wealth, but each of them, they have to chart, they have to express out their own path. So that's why you have spiritual wealth. Doesn't mean it's automatic blessing for you. You have to do something. But the thing I want to say, I already said earlier on, is we have to be careful not to be satisfied with past glory. And this is what a lot of denomination is doing. Every time they have an issue, they think about the glory days. And some of the glory days is like a few 100 years ago, okay? So it's like, I don't know, all the glory is already, I was thinking, it already become fermentation, okay? Become fossil. Fossil, you know what is fossil? So it's not even dinosaur, it's fossil, okay? And so that's the thing. We have to be careful not to be so desiring the old things that that we go into a religious and status quo paradigm. Okay, a few more slides and we're done. All right, so generational alignment. So there are three things I want to talk about here today. So when I use the word generational alignment, I'm talking about the things we need to do now. Everyone say now. So you can say, in the past, the last generation didn't do so well. No, it doesn't matter. The past is irrelevant. What is important is what do you want to do now. So everyone say now again. Now. So the three things I think is important for us to think. The first one is the triumphant reserve, okay? God has his reserve in every nation and region. So that's the good news, right? And this is what, remember when Elijah was having his emo time, right? Then all of a sudden God said, yet I will leave 7,000 in Israel, all the knees that have not bowed to Baal. In every season and time, there will always be triumphant reserve. Always. But here's the thing. The existence of reserve does not mean a sheep status is guaranteed. You still need to fight. And there are many, many nations with the right reserve, they still become goat. So that's the thing we have to understand. But it does mean that the nation with reserve, that means every nation at least have some fighting chance. Right? But of course, the sad thing is we know some will still become goat. So what is the qualification of triumphant reserve? This is very quickly for us to understand. If you want to be a triumphant, now by the way, the whole concept of Gideon army, I think is very relevant for us because you think about Gideon when he raised up about 20,000 army, right? Are they all his army? 20,000? Is it all Gideon? Is it all for God? It's not a trick question. Yes, it is the army of God. But in the end, he only need 300. And that's why the thing about the triumphant reserve is, it is not the entire ecclesia. is only those people who want to do fully the things of God. So 3 things I think is very, very important for triumphant reserve. You have to accept heaven's present truth. You have to accept that this is what God is doing now. So if you're like, oh no, God, if people have this mindset, oh, what God is doing now is good, it's optional, but there are many other good things also, then you are already disqualified from being a triumphant reserve. You have to be fully loyal to what God is doing now. Then, of course, the other thing is you have to believe it is possible to overcome. Now, I'll tell you, maybe it's not even shocking. There are so many people who does that. I'm talking about believer. I'm not talking about unbeliever, okay? They don't believe that it is possible to overcome. For a nation, for example. So many people have already given up on whatever nation they are in. But in Revelation 12, we saw the overcoming spirit, right? The overcoming spirit. So you want to be a triumphant reserve, you have to accept, you have to process this. And if you feel like this is something that is lacking in your life, then ask God to activate this overcoming spirit. Then, of course, you have the truth, you have this, but you still need to actually do it, right? So sometimes you see people with the most talent, with the most training, and they're like, they should be winning a lot of things, but they don't win. Why? Because they do not do what is required. They are not committed to the process. And that is what separates, actually when you look at professional sports, I think all of them all the talent level is very high. Right? I mean, everyone, but the difference is really the commitment and the will. And this is what is required for the triumphant reserve. So that's number one, the first alignment way to do. The second thing I think we have to ask ourselves, and this is something that it is always raised in every generation, but especially right now, we have to understand true unity. Everyone say true unity. And we know this scripture very well, right? Psalms 133, 1-2. A lot of people like to quote this, and it's a good verse. Behold, how good and pleasant it is for brothers and sisters to dwell together in unity. It is like the precious oil upon the head of Aaron. So there are many in the ecclesia who speaks of the unity and desire to see it manifest. It is a good thing. It is a good thing. So we should have unity. But the thing about unity is we have to define what is unity. Because if you don't define it right, then you are creating your own humanistic unity. Yeah. You're creating your... By the way, do you know Tower of Babel was unity? Yeah. And the Spirit of God say, if they are united, there's nothing they cannot do. But that's a demonic unity. So that's why we have to have a true kingdom understanding of unity. And with that, let's begin by looking at what Jesus himself said. Luke 12:51. Do you suppose that I came to grant peace on earth? I tell you no, but rather division. So here's the thing I want everyone to understand. Biblically and also historically, every time there's a move of Holy Spirit, it creates division, it creates separation. It is in the Bible, it is in the church history. It is what it is because, why? Every time God sets a standard, you will have people who want the standard and you will have people who rationalize the standard and say, oh, it's not really for us. See, the body of Christ, unfortunately, has become very good at rationalizing. Actually, they're very smart. They don't, I shouldn't say smart, actually, they're very religious. Actually, when I say they, I include us also. We are very religious because, we don't outright reject. Oh, we're not against what you do. What you all do is very good. We're not against it. But there are so many other good things we can focus on. You rationalize. But every time there's the present truth comes down on earth, it creates division and separation. So let's look at the first one, Abram. The first to cross over, right? He's called Hebrew, right? Now, I really believe in Genesis 11, I read it so many times. I really believe that it was actually for his entire family. That means it was supposed to be for the father, for Haran, for Lot's family also. But Haran died, the father died. See, in the end, none of his extended family transitioned into the covenant. Not even Lot. And actually, of all the people, you can argue Lot probably is the one that is supposed to be there. So that means that the nation should have included Lot's nation from the beginning. Then you look at Israel, is separated as a covenant nation. From the early on, everyone is against them until now. Right? How many thousand years later, right? Still the same thing. How many thousand years? I think it's about 3,500 years. 3,500 years. Is it? And but then here's the thing. The ironic thing is, even though everyone is against them, they are the benchmark. They are the plumb line of which all other nations will be judged. Then that's what's happening in America right now is very, very interesting, because you have the American first, a camp of them doesn't want to associate with Israel anymore. So it's really interesting. I mean, just 2 days ago, I don't know if you read the news, when Prime Minister Netanyahu was in U.S., so finally Vice President J.D. Vance met him, and they have some kind of trashing out, because Vance is the one that represents the camp that doesn't want to work with Israel. Yeah, okay, so some of you may not follow the news very carefully, so this is the benefit of summarizing for you, okay? Just now I was just reminded, like, remember when Joyce was promoting the book teaching, right? And some of you will be like, oh, I can read the book yourself. So what's the benefit? Especially if the book is very, very long. I don't know how many of you know, like when we did perspective, one chapter is super long. If I didn't summarize it, you'll be staying until 10 p.m., okay? So that's the benefit. Because I'm a super summarizer. Anyway, moving on. Jesus, when he came, he did so many separation. First, from his own forerunner group, John the Baptist. One round already. But then he also created a permanent schism with the religious order. Sanhedrin, the teachers of the law, he created a permanent, permanent fracture, whatever you want to call it. Because he came to represent the truth of what Jesus wanted to do. Then you look at church history. Every restoration of truth since Martin Luther, it created a new group. It created a new denomination. Every single time. You know, when you have the first Pentecostal, when you're Azusa Street, who is the one separated? It's the holiness movement. The holiness movement people are the most offended. The Wesley, the A.W. Tozer people, they get offended with Holy Spirit. So ironic, right? So this is the thing. Every time you have a new revelation, it creates division. Because you always have some people who doesn't want it. But here's the sobering truth. Those who did not embrace the new will become old wineskin very quickly. And we always say this is the thing that we want to avoid the most. We don't want to one day become old wineskin. That's pretty scary, right? So what is true unity? And this is what Jesus said in Matthew 7:21, the one I referenced earlier on. Not everyone who says to me, Lord, Lord, will enter the kingdom of heaven, but he who does the will of my Father. So I want to emphasize this part. He who does the will of my Father. So that means the one that is part of the kingdom is really those who obey truly what God is saying for them to do. So when we look at this, how do we define true unity? So it's not based on the unity of the people here. We can have unity here, right? We can, what do you like to do? We can have a unity on the temperature of this room. Let's vote for the ideal aircon temperature or whatever. I mean, some churches do that, It's like, the seeker-friendly model. Okay, let's not get into that, okay? So, it's like, it's not from God. God's standard always separate. But what is the unity? The unity is really between us, the ecclesia, and heaven. So it's like we are always asking the question, what is God's standard? What is his plumb line? And you see the prophets of old, it's always the same. And from time to time, they get a bit emo. I mean, that's why it's very instructive to read. It's very instructive to read all the prophets because they are human. And they get very sad from time to time. Okay? So they have to ask God, what is the standard? See, church unity, if we are not careful, then we can promote. We will seek to enforce what I call earthly carnal club rules. So it's like your own club rule. It's like what you like. Oh, the music cannot be so loud. It's like, I'm not saying all these are bad things, but this is not the true unity. This is just your own personal preference. Which, if you can get everyone to agree of certain things, the aircon temperature, the music volume, that's fine. But don't call that unity. Don't call that unity. Call that your personal preference. So that's why we are in a season again. And remember so clearly when we move into the eyeing season, then we move into the pay season every time. But we're here again. Next year is a year of the sword. That's why I remember 10 years ago, during the year of the sword, there is so much separation. Because the sword comes to cut. And that's the reason why we are doing the teaching apostolic course on Jezebel, because that is the thing that is very prevalent, especially in our Confucius society, very easily captured by the spirit of Jezebel. So when you are here again, we need to draw our lines. So you have to draw, and that's one of the prophetic words that God released many years ago, is we have to learn to draw our line. Otherwise, God will draw the line. So that means if you don't do it yourself, He will do it for you. And that time you may not like it. Because you are doing your own thing and then suddenly a line is drawn. So what happens when a line is drawn, relationships are separated and things like that? Okay, the last point about generational alignment is a realignment of nations. Very quickly, there are three aspects to that, okay? Of course, we already mentioned this many times, which is there has to be a proper alignment with the first prototype covenant nation, Israel. And of course, we kept saying that it is a challenge for Malaysia. But I believe that, like for example, what we do here, and there are many other tribes that they have done that. So we do have some kind of alignment with the First Nation, and how do we influence the national agenda? And I really think that, of course, now if you look at Middle East, it's like going back to fighting again. But imagine, I said this a few times already, imagine if Saudi would join Abraham Accord. If Indonesia would say Israel can visit them, then that will take all the excuses that Malaysia is doing. But this is just something to think about. Then, of course, first with Israel, then second, you have alignment with other nations. And that is critical for our nation. So remember when Chuck Pierce came last year, he talked about 10 nations that's supposed to align with us. Then thirdly, the last one is within our nation. Because we are a nation of many nations, right? So at minimum, we started off with 4 nations, 1 has left, but we still have 3 nations. And that's why I did this part. I was just thinking about when we did Nation Watch this earlier this week, and we talked about self-determination, right? So self-determination, basically, it's like you decide what you want. And even parents with children, at some point, you have to allow them to have self-determination. Right? You cannot be like, you cannot be, they call it a helicopter parent, right? Everything you want to. No, at some point, you cannot control anymore. So the thing is, when you think that the children are ready, you should let them have some self-determination while you can still supervise, okay? When you cannot supervise and you give them self-determination, it's a very bad timing. So with self-determination, what kind of options you have? You have an option of separation. You can actually, like Singapore actually exercises separation, right? Of course, now we know it's a deal. Or you can have a nation within a nation, which is more of an American federalist kind of mindset, which is like, they have 50 states, but all the 50 states, they really function more like their own country. Do you know that in US, every state have their own election law? That means they decide how you can vote. Every state different. So some states, they allow the mail to be posted in, and they allow the voting to be counted weeks after the polling has closed. California. So for example, so it's like so stupid, right? You have election, you allow the counting to continue weeks and weeks later. That means you're basically, but anyway, what I'm trying to say is that, this is a cause of decentralization. So it could be like that. Now, here's the thing I want to end with, is when we think about all these kind of things, it's really, we think about the tension between the voice of God and decision of man. Because some people will be like, we definitely, I'm talking about self-determination in Malaysia context. Because there are some people who believe that, like Sarawak, for example, it should be a separate nation and things like that. I don't see it like God prophesied and it must happen. I see it like you have the voice of God, but then He also leave it to the decision of man. So you have to think like that. Because, I give you one example. I believe God wanted Lot to be part of the covenant. Then they screw up. Then what? Is God wrong? No, God cannot be responsible for the decision of man. There is a reason why you cannot prophesy who is going to marry who. Seriously, Bishop Bill Hammond said that it is a prophetic protocol. Why? Because you cannot override the will of man. You can see in heaven, I don't care who you are, but the will of man can cancel out heaven. The person can be like, I don't want it. Then what? That's why when it comes to self-determination of a nation, I really feel we shouldn't be so absolute and say, this is what I heard from God. Yeah, you heard from God, maybe. But then if some people decided to do otherwise, what are you going to do? So that's why the balance there, okay? All right, so let's just recap. So kingdom process, remember the whole kingdom process, the fundamental, work on the fundamental. Don't skip on all the small exercise. And people will be like, oh, you know, in fact, next week we have first fruit again, so fast. So we're going to have leadership training. I was just thinking what to teach, right? So I think one of the things, because I have 1 hour, okay? I think Mark, you are doing the teaching, right? Mark and Jacob. So Mark and Jacob will be very interesting. So preview, please come and learn from them. But I was just thinking about, I want to share how God taught me kingdom process. Because I know some of you will think it's very, very bizarre, but when I was, okay, not so young now, when I was like doing all this spiritual stuff, I never considered myself even remotely prophetic. I consider myself very unprophetic. I know some of you will be, really? And it's really because of the greed mindset. The greed mindset was very strong in me. So before the gift can be activated, the greed mindset has to be dismantled. So I want to share a bit of how I do the process. Then, of course, concept of sheep nation is a revision for us. Redigging spiritual well, some of you know, of course, here in Malaysia, we have only one recorded revival, burial revival, of course, but there are many, many other things that we can look at that give us certain spiritual well we can dig up. Then, of course, generation alignment, 3 things we talk about, which is the reserve, we talk about the relationship between the nations, and, of course, true unity also.